Good morning, everyone. I'm not even going to pretend that the two stories that I'm about to tell you are original, but I'd ask you to humor me if you've heard them before, and if you haven't, you can let me know that. The first story takes place on the Gulf Coast, and we've heard about this kind of thing just in recent news over the last few years. There is a huge hurricane bearing down on the Gulf Coast and heading up toward Louisiana. And Louisiana is Cajun country with fierce Cajun Catholics. And there is one man living in a town up the coast from the Delta, and he is a man of deep, deep, deep faith. So when he hears about this storm coming, he says, "I've lived here all my life, and I know that I'm going to be able to wait out this storm. God will protect me." So, the storm gathers strength. The news begins to indicate there's going to be an evacuation. He ignores the news. His neighbors, a little concerned about him. He's living by himself. They see his car in the driveway. They knock on the door. "Listen, come on. You got to come with us," right? "We are in the path of a destructive storm." He says, "Listen, I've lived here all my life. I'm a man of deep faith. God will save me." Well, they take off. They're the smart ones. The water levels rise. The wind starts to bash the house. The trees are shaking. All of a sudden, an emergency crew comes up the street, and the water is high enough in the street that they're riding a little skiff. They use their loudspeaker. "Old man, get out of there. We'll take you up north. There's still time." He yells back, No, I'm staying. I'm going to guard my house, and God will protect me." They head off. They're the smart ones. The water level rises. The man gets up on his dining room table. He's thinking, boy, maybe I better head up to the second floor. He hightails it up the second floor. All of a sudden, he hears the thwap, 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 thwap of an emergency Coast Guard helicopter. He sees a rope ladder unfold in front of the window. He hears the loudspeaker, "Get out of there. There's a storm coming. It's just about down on us." No, I'll be fine. God will save me." All of a sudden, after the shadow of the helicopter passes, he sees the green hazy light that says that the storm is about there. He sees the funnel, right? And the next thing he knows, as he blinks, he opens his eyes in heaven. He's drenched. He looks down and sees his house is just like matchsticks, completely destroyed. He's a little ticked. He says to God, "God, why didn't you save me?" God says, "You idiot. I tried 3 times. How many of you have heard that one? Raise your hands. Okay, at least about a third of you. I've got another one. So the story goes like this. There's a man who thinks he's going to make it rich with the lottery. And he is very excited because that month the lottery is up to $1 million. And he's a man of deep, deep, deep faith. He says, "I'm going to pray and pray and pray." And he imagines that the day after the lottery is announced, someone's going to knock on the door and they're going to have one of those big checks and a film crew. Well, the morning after, he's waiting and waiting and waiting, and no one comes to the door. A few months later, the lottery is up to $50 million. But he realizes maybe praying wasn't enough. I'm going to fast this time. He prays, he fasts, he prays. He goes to bed. He's all excited. He waits for that knock. There's a knock at the door. But it's a neighbor asking to borrow his hose. He's crestfallen. A few months later, the lottery is up to $100 million. he remembers, oh yeah, my neighbors used to bury St. Joseph, a little statue of him in the backyard to try to sell their house. Maybe that'll work for the lottery. He prays, he fasts, he buries poor St. Joseph in the backyard. The next morning, nothing. That night, he is on his knees praying, God, you're not getting anywhere with me here. I'm really frustrated. And he hears a voice, and it's God. And God says, I'm doing the best I can, but would you please at least buy a lottery ticket this time? Okay, how many of you have heard that one? Okay, even fewer. Okay, I'm on good ground here. I think that our readings today, they pose a question to us about the power of prayer. They actually confront us with the question of what is the proportion of divine to human agency when we're looking for miracles? Classically, this would be the question of what is the relationship between nature and grace? So, as we begin to ponder these questions, we reflect back on these readings. In Exodus, Moses, on behalf of his people, keeps his arms upraised. And while as long as they're upraised, his army triumphs over the Amalekites. But then as soon as he gets tired, they begin to flag and the enemy begins to surge. He gets his arms back up there and succeeds in fending them off. It's too bad Coach Schaefer couldn't have tried this yesterday, right? There seems to be this power of human agency to be persuasive to God in that Old Testament. In the Psalm, we hear repeated, God will be our help. Don't trust so much in human agency. It's the divine will that will save. In Paul's letter to Timothy, we hear this encouragement to read the scriptures, to be faithful in prayer, because when we are, we will discover the competence to do great things for God in the world. And there seems to be this partnership between human and divine agency. Finally, in our gospel today, Luke describes Jesus' parable about this poor woman, this widow who's been wronged. She's been unjustly deprived. She seeks redress from a judge. She's persistent. And finally, she gets what she wants. She represents poor people and people who are at the wrong end of the stick around the world, those who long for justice or for more equality or more peace. And their cries go to God, right? And we can imagine people close and far away, their prayers. Imagine, for instance, the prayers of people in Damascus in Syria today for peace, for security, for food, right? 30 more people were killed by a bombing last night. Imagine if we move our attention up to Somalia, where famine brought on by climate change has led to civil war, and civil war has led fishermen to become pirates, and pirates to attack ships. And it seems crazy. And imagine their prayers for crops to bear fruit. Imagine the prayers of men and women living under our bridges in this city who are hungry and cold and in need. When we reflect on these prayers offered up to God, we might wonder who will answer them. Who will answer them? If you recall, just a short while ago, America was considering a very intense strike against the militants in Syria, and there was an outcry of protest because of concern for casualties, for collateral damage, for human loss. And the Pope instituted a fast and encouraged the world to pray for peace. Now, I'm not saying there's a one-to-one equation there, but isn't it amazing that a week later, after that fast, and millions of people around the world prayed for peace, world leaders with incredible power were moved to set aside differences. America worked with Russia to deal with these chemical weapons without violence. It still hasn't solved the problem, but a terrible disaster was at least defrayed. What is the power of prayer? And what is our power to be the answers to prayers? You know, there are people close and far in our lives who are praying this day for comfort, for company, for a little more reassurance of their value in our lives. There are people who will approach us when we leave here and ask for money, for food. And we might be a little concerned about where that money's going to go. But instead of saying no, we might accompany them to a store and buy them some food and have a conversation with them. Are we willing to be the answer to someone's prayers today? To allow God and God's grace to move our hearts, to be available to others, and to give them some of our time and our energy and our resource? St. Ignatius, the founder of the Jesuits, was a practical mystic. He wanted to cover his bases. He once said, "Pray as if all things depend on God, but act as if your success all depends on you." Does that make sense? I'm going to say that again. Pray as if all things depend on God, but act as if your success relies entirely on your own efforts. There is a sense in which we, my friends, long for the kingdom as Jesus did, a world that's more equitable and just and peaceful for all, no matter where they live. If we too desire such a world, then like Jesus, we have to become the answer to others' prayers.